Hello, beautiful souls. Welcome to Self-Manifest, where we unlock the secrets to manifesting desires and achieving your dreams. I'm honored to share something truly transformative with you before we begin today's session. Through years of studying the human mind, I've discovered the incredible power of manifestation. For those eager to explore their consciousness, I'm presenting a unique tool that aligns with your essence, making manifestation effortless. Click the link below to discover its potential. Let's start today's session.
Like I said a while ago, I found a lot of cancer, especially colon cancer, is suppressed anger. They can't talk about it, they just hold it in. It's anger at somebody or something, and you can't hold emotions inside of you. You start holding emotions inside of you, it begins to eat away, and you become sick. You don't want to let it get to that point. So a lot of the things I found the same thing over and over, causing different types of disease, just like OT was saying. Certain parts of the body are affected in different ways. But if we can find out why are they angry, people carry so much garbage and baggage around with them that they need to get rid of. And that's part of what I do. I spend a lot of time with each client, and a lot of it is talking to them, finding out about them, what's going on in their life. And it doesn't take much for them to start turning me into Mother Confessor. I can spend a couple of hours just letting them tell me about all their family problems and their husbands, and they're crying, and but it's good for them. I have to know what we're going to be working on. But people carry so much junk around with them, and that's what makes them sick. And it's also what perpetuates karma, because you've got to let it go. Otherwise, you're going to have to come back and do the same thing again with the same people. And they all say, no, I don't want to do that. And then I said, you better let it go. And it goes back to it was Aaron's book, where he says in there about karma, the quickest, but not necessarily the easiest way to get rid of karma. What is it? And some people say, to pay it back, do it back to them. That just keeps the wheel of karma going. The easiest, but not the quickest, but not the easiest, is to forgive. Let it go. You have to let it go. That's what you hang on to, and it creates more karma. Also makes you sick. But I've had people tell me, I can't forgive them. You don't know what they did to me. But they're hurting themselves more than anything. I am going to get to the subjects that were in that fire, but I thought this would be important to talk about also. I had this one man. I never was able to work with him because he mostly just talked to me on the telephone. His wife was on the phone. He had cancer in just about every part of his body. Every time they would operate and get rid of cancer in one part of his body, it would move to another part of the body. And he just kept going on and on and on. And his wife was saying, can you help him? Can you do something? And I said, well, is he angry about anything? Is he having any problems in his life? And he said, oh yes, it's my ex-wife. I hate her. She has the children, I can't see them. And he had all this rage against his ex-wife. You see what it was doing to him? And I said, well, you're going to have to forgive her and let it go. We all come into life with a contract to try to do the best we can with other people we owe karma to. I said, tear up the contract, let it go, it's not doing any good, cut them loose, and tell them to go with love. Forgive them and let them go on. He said, I can't do that. If I do that, she has won. I said, she'll win if she kills you. But you see how it's something like that is so simple, but we don't realize it. But it is hard because we do bear grudges. We have revenge. We can't have to get back at them. All it does is make our life more miserable because we don't know what it's doing to us. So that's part of what I have to do, let them talk and let them find out what it is that they're looking for And part of the therapy is to get them to release these things so that they can recover. But a lot of times you have to go, that's this life, but sometimes it's carried over from other lives. Maybe they've had a pattern where they've been with this same person through many, many lives, and they still haven't worked it out. Well, if it's been that long, I don't think they're going to work it out. It's better just to let it go. But sometimes we can take them back to another life to find out where this came from. That's the karma part. And we also take them back to find out physical ailments. And I could go on. I've talked at so many different lectures where I've spent the whole day talking about illnesses and where they come from in other past lives and the direct connections. And I talk about this in my classes too, so I don't want to go into too much of that. But we have found so many illnesses that go back to past lives. When you find what causes it, it goes away. Because if the subconscious is trying to give you a message, once the message has been delivered, there's no sense in keep trying to give you the message. Once you understand what's causing the problem, it disappears. And I have seen miraculous healings. And to me, that makes me feel so good. And I've gotten emails where they tell them, they go back to the doctors and the doctors say, I have no explanation for this. Everything is gone. And they take them off the medication because they don't need it anymore. To me, that's so satisfying. I've had people right there in my office be healed instantaneously before they leave the office. And it shows how powerful your mind is once you understand, and it all falls into place. But when I'm doing the sessions, a strange phenomena began to happen. When I do it, the past life is one thing. A lot of hypnotists, that's where they stop. They do the past life and that's it. Afterwards, a person will say, well, it was interesting. I was in ancient Egypt. I was in ancient Rome. What does it have to do with me now? You have to tie it together. You have to find out, why did you see that past life? What is it having to do with you now? And that's where you get the therapy and the healings. Well, after I do that, that's when I use the technique to contact the subconscious mind, because the subconscious has all of the answers. And the person usually comes in with a whole list. I tell them, bring a list of questions, everything you want to find out. And when we get into the subconscious mind, we can ask all of these questions, and we can find the answers, if it's appropriate. Sometimes it's not time for you to know the answers. In that case, I can't get the answers. But if it's time, they will tell you the answers to everything you want to know. So this is a very powerful form of therapy. But strange things began happening while I began doing this type of therapy, speaking to the subconscious. That's where the books are coming from, The Convoluted Universe. Because I call them they. To me now it's like calling up an old friend on the phone. Now, I don't know how anyone could say this is fraud or hoax or made up, because through everybody I work with, the same thing happens. When I ask for the subconscious, it's always the same voice, the same way of wording it, and they always say the same things. They always talk about the person in the third person. And they can be pretty cruel sometimes. We'll say, well, finally I'm getting a chance to talk, it's about time. They haven't been listening to me. And it'd be like, well, I have had two lately where, and Julie's nodding her head back there, one man, he was so bad off anyway. Usually the subconscious will do everything it can to help the person. It will heal them, it will give them advice, because it always says the same thing, we love you and we will take care of you. Now how can it be the same thing all the time if I haven't touched into something that is real? This one man, well, there's two really. The man told me he had stopped drinking. His smoking was so bad that his lungs were just shot. and he had gone for another healer who had helped his lungs. Well, he was telling me, I just want to have the session because, but he went back to smoking. I didn't know that. A lot of them say, well, I'm cured now, I can go back to the old habits. And he told me he wasn't drinking anymore. Well, the subconscious, I always says, is a blabbermouth. If you're going to lie to me or not tell me the truth, it will tell me the truth. And this one man, it was saying, he's lying to you. He hasn't quit drinking. He's still drinking and he's still smoking. And we helped him once with the lungs, and it says, we're tired of it. We're not going to help him anymore if he won't make the effort. And I don't want to ever cross them. Their power is too great. I'd rather cooperate with them. I don't want to do something that's going to make them say, well, the heck with you. But imagine if they've tried all the person's life and they're not paying attention to them. They tried everything, and this is what they said to him. Well, we give you so many chances, now that's it. Whatever happens now is in your own hands, but we're not going to help you anymore. Well, I told him that when he woke up. I said, you didn't tell me the truth, He said, well, how are you going to know the difference? But, but it's up to him now. Is he going to stop smoking? Is he going to stop drinking? Because they have tried and tried and tried, and they'll say, it's a wasted life. Why should we bother? It's better for you just to get out of here. Well, this other one I did a few months ago, I'd even forgot about him because I do so many until my daughter, you said he got an email or a phone call? Phone call. This guy, now these are rare. These are rare because the majority of people get a lot of help and they're very loving. So when this happens, it's always like, why is the subconscious suddenly acting cruel? Well, this man, it kept saying, you have wasted your life, you have not done anything you were supposed to do, you're ruining everybody else's life. It was just a big mess. And he said, you're out of here. We're not going to help you anymore. And I sure wouldn't want it to say that to me. But it says he wasn't advancing. He was wasting his life. So they said, that's it, we're out of here. And I didn't think anything more about it till she got this phone call. And what did he say? He said that his friend, that what? His cousin called about something else. And he said when the man got home and started listening to the tape, he's suddenly changing. He said he's acting different toward people. He's trying to live his life in a different way. Maybe it shook him up. Maybe it scared him to where he's thinking, if they're going to give up on me, I better make some changes. But those are rare for it to do that. As a rule, it will help them and it will give you a great deal of information. But as I'm doing this all over the world, this is what began to get a little strange, is that sometimes at the end of the session, when I always ask for advice, or if I always say, if you got any last message or advice for the client before we wake up? Sometimes they'll come in and say, sometimes they'll yell at me, Dolores, okay, what now, And then they'll usually bawl me out, something I'm not doing that I was supposed to. They changed my diet. They got me off of Pepsi. I used to live on Pepsi. And that was an interesting thing because I was doing this in Las Vegas right after 9/11. I had about 10, I was in Laughlin, Nevada at the UFO conference. I had a whole bunch of clients and I was doing this one. And toward the end, they came in and yelled at me. Well, before that, we had been in Orlando, wasn't it? At the Universal Studios and all of that down there. And I was living on Pepsi. I never drank water. And I got dehydrated down there. I didn't know what it was, but my daughter, Julie, is a nurse, and she said, Mom, you're dehydrated. You got to drink water. I said, water? What's that? I don't drink water. And so she kept bawling me out about it. Anyway, I went directly the next few days to the conference in Laughlin. And I was doing this session with this woman. And toward the end of the session, when I asked, do you have a message before we leave or advice for Susan? They yelled at me. They said, Dolores. And okay. Now this is coming through this woman. I always wonder, what do they think when they get home and listen to these tapes? You know? They'll say, who was that? That wasn't me. And I said, okay, what is it? And they said, you're dehydrated. You've got to drink water. It's affecting your kidneys. Now, this lady didn't know anything about anything. And they said, oh, by the way, tell your daughter to call home. Her daughter's trying to get a hold of her. It's not an emergency, but just tell her to call home. Because my daughter was watching the book table. Anyway, then they go on, but they get your attention. So anyway, after it was over, I went down to the book table, and I was telling them, guess what they just said? And I told them, they said I was dehydrated. But you were there, weren't you, or was it Nancy? She goes, like, touche, you know. She said, you won't believe us, but you believe them. And then they said, well, they just said, too, to call home. Jackie's trying to get a hold of you. And she said, I just did. It wasn't anything serious. She just needed some money. But see, they even knew that. It was funny. But anyway, they kept on me every time we would have a session to make sure I was getting off of the Pepsi and I was getting onto water. And then they would check in my diet. You're to eat this, you're not to eat that. And one time during the session, they said, we saw you eat some beef last night, and we told you you're not supposed to do that. I said, well, it was just a little bit of beef that was in some soup, you know. But, but they said, they're always giving people diet information. And they said what they're putting in the beef and the pork now is not good. And that they said when it gets into your body, it takes as long as 6 months to get this stuff out of your system. So they said to try to stay out of it or use organic as best you can. They said chicken and fish is better, but if you can get organic meat, that's the best of all. But the very best thing they suggest eating is live food, as they call it, which they mean fresh fruits and vegetables. And that's what they keep telling everyone that comes if they're having problems, and they'll say, well, it goes back to your diet. This is what you need to be eating. And they said the importance of water is beyond belief. We don't have any idea the importance of water, that there's things in the water that the body absolutely must have, and a lot of it is being taken out by the way the water is filtered and everything now. But they said the water is of the utmost importance to the body. Of course, it's of importance to the whole planet, too. They're concerned about all of that, too. But anyway, that's what they kept doing, and it took me a while, but I got off the Pepsi. People used to say they used to have to pay me to advertise the Pepsi because I always had to have my bottle there, you know. But I got off of all of that, and I'm eating what they tell me to eat. And so I'm trying to be a good girl with all of that. But they'll tell me if I'm not supposed to go somewhere. They can be very emphatic about it. They said, one time they said, would you like protection? And I said, well, yeah, I can use all I can get. And they said, all right, if you're not supposed to go somewhere, we will not even allow you to go out the front door. Something will happen that you may think is bad, but it just means you were not supposed to go. And sometimes things have been canceled or things I can't go to somewhere, and I just said, well, I'm not supposed to do it. But they said, you'll always be protected if you listen to what we're trying to tell you. And I said, I can use that. And right after 9/11, I was supposed to go to Istanbul in Turkey. They had a first UFO conference over there. And I was holding my tickets. I hadn't got them. They were holding them. 3 times through 3 different clients, they yelled at me and they said, do not go to Turkey. It's too dangerous right now. I said, maybe later, but not now. So when I went home and was telling my kids, they said, well, you going to believe them? if you tell you 3 times, don't go. And so I just canceled the tickets. And then I found, well, you know, that was right at the time we started bombing Afghanistan. It would not have been a good time for a white American woman to be going into that area, so they knew that, I guess. But it ended up that the conference was canceled anyway, because they said they didn't think they were going to get the attendance from Europe. But I don't mind if they're going to take care of me. I think that's fine. And they do it in all kinds of strange ways. But what began happening was, during these sessions, they would begin giving me information, especially toward the end. But then it began now that some of the sessions are information that I need. I still try to do the therapy, but they're going to get the information in there. I may be in England doing a session. Toward the end of it, they'll come in and they wait till we're through with what we're trying to do. And toward the end of it, they'll say, Dolores, this is the next piece of information you need for your next book. And they'll give me a theory that I've never heard of before. Then I go home. The next week, I'm doing a client in the States. Happens again, and they expand on the same theory that the first one has given me. Now, see, how can this be coincidence, random? Because none of these people know anything about what I do. I'm focused on them and their problems. They don't tell me anything about myself at all. But it keeps happening over and over again. I get a piece of information here and a piece of information there. And it's happening constantly now, and usually that's when I say, can I have a copy of the tape, because there's something on there that I need. And it may not be the entire tape, it may be just one piece of information that fits in with all the rest. And this is where the Convoluted Universe book series is coming from. These new theories and new things that they keep giving me. And I thought I had heard it all, but now they keep coming up with new things all the time. But they said, you know, what I'm getting now, if I'd gotten 30, 20 years ago when I was first starting, I wouldn't have understood it. It would have been overwhelming. So they said you had to wait till the right time in your life before you could get this. They told me one time, it was about a client I was working with, they said, he is where you were 20 years ago. You have to give a baby milk and then cereal and then crushed vegetables. You can't give a baby a 3-course meal. You have to wait until the baby grows a little bit. So I said, over all these years, they've been spoon feeding me. A little bit of information, let you digest that, then a little bit more complicated, let you digest that, and then till it's got to this point where I keep thinking there isn't anything else, but it's getting more and more complicated. So I have no idea where it's all headed, but I have enough information now to write book 3 of the Convoluted Universe. And the majority of it has come from the clients coming to my office in Huntsville. It pours out of people. So it's just very strange information. Some of it is very hard to understand. You know, when I wrote book 1, I told everybody that was a book for people who wanted their minds bent like pretzels, because I didn't understand it, and I said, if they want to tackle it, and they're telling me they love it, even though they don't understand it, it makes them think. And I thought they'd start at the easier books and then get down to that. But now they said they read book 2, and they said, when's the next one coming out? We want to keep thinking. We want to know this information. So, okay, I'm trying to figure out where I should start in this, because there's so much. I do lectures on so many different topics, but I know I want to get to the New Earth before we're finished anyway, because there's a lot of things happening right now they want me to tell people, because we're moving into a new time. But some of the things OT was saying were right on, because those are the things that you read the books, you know what he was talking about, the soul, and oversoul, and how we are splinters and all of this. I don't want to get too complicated for people. I like to stay at a level where I think they can handle it. And if later if you want to ask some complicated questions, I'll go into that, but I'm trying to keep it a level that I think most people can handle. Hopefully, anyway, okay. But one of the things that I was going into, finding out a lot about, was dimensions. And I found out a lot about this when I was working with ETs, because I've been doing the ETs and the UFO abductions for 20 years. And I speak at just about every UFO conference in the world. And my information is positive. I have never found the negativity. And because I don't deal with the conscious mind where the fear is, I deal with the part of the mind that has the information. The other investigators, the other hypnotists don't do that. They stay with the surface conscious mind that has the fear. So when I'm doing, just a minute, I know how OT felt a while ago. The same thing happens to me. You have all this information flooding in, and you have to say, you're trying to keep up with it. That's what the ETs say. It's easier to do thought to thought instead of trying to do it verbally. Okay, but they said that it has to do with dimensions. Now, dimensions are around us all the time. We're just not aware of them. And in some of these dimensions, there are cities, there are people living, but we don't know about them, they know about us. The reason we're not aware of them is because they're vibrating at a different frequency. If you ever watch a fan blade or a propeller blade, when it speeds up, it becomes invisible. That's the way these dimensions are. They're vibrating at a different frequency, and that's why they're invisible. And there's thousands of these. Some people say, oh, there's only like the 4 dimensions, or maybe 5 at the most. I said, there are countless dimensions. They're thinking in the baby terms, the simple terms of the 4 dimensions that we're aware of. There's many, many more than that, because it's much more complicated than we can think of. Now, the ETs, the ones in the UFOs, use these dimensions to travel, because all they do is change the vibration of the craft to go back and forth between dimensions. So you don't need to have, like some investigators I work with want to know, what kind of fuel do they use in the craft to get from here to that star out there? And they're having the hardest time understanding it's not done that way. It's done with thought. And they go back and forth through dimensions. Rather like Star Trek, when they say, engage and Mach whatever, and they are there because they change the vibration, the frequency of the ship. And this is what they do. But I've done lectures on this. I'm not going to go into the whole thing about ETs. But they change the vibration or frequency, and this is how they appear suddenly into our atmosphere, and how they disappear just as quickly. Well, these dimensions are all around us, and we are constantly going in and out of these dimensions, and we don't even know it. This is all part of life. What OT was talking about a while ago, these strange things that happen, like the one who was almost off the cliff. And my brother-in-law, too, was almost hit by the car. I've had a lot of people emailing me with strange stories and wanting me to explain what's going on. I had one, we covered it in the session, one of her questions, because she said she was in Florida and she was out jogging, and this is in the city, on a city street. And as she was jogging down the street, she saw what looked like an airplane coming in to land, coming in among these palm trees. She could see the tail of the plane. It was a big plane. And she said, oh my gosh, there's a plane crashing. And so she ran all the way back to the house, turned on the TV so she could hear about the plane crashing. There wasn't anything. So she said, what happened? So that's one of the things she wanted to ask about during the session. They said what she was doing, she slipped into another dimension. And in that dimension, there was an airport existed there. But it didn't exist in her reality. Some of these dimensions, there could be different things like that, and we're not aware of it, unless something happens like that to get your attention. They talk about people walking down a street, and maybe they notice a beautiful tree that's there on the other side of the street, The next time they go down the street, there isn't any tree. You may have had some of these things happen to you. I had a girl that was in college, and she said she came out of her dorm, and they were doing construction on the street out in front of her dorm. And it was all tore up, and they had these orange cones and everything around. The next day she comes out of the dorm. There's nothing, no sign of any construction at all. So sometimes these things happen and you're not even aware of it. I had another person who was came out of an apartment building. When he came down in the elevator, came out on the street, everything was the way it was 50 years ago. The cars, the buildings, the way the people were dressed. Nobody seemed to be aware of him, but it was like, oh my gosh, he was so frightened. They walked around for a while, and he finally went back into the building, and he got back in the elevator, went back up in the elevator. He was back in now. I wouldn't want to be stuck there, but who knows? This has to do with different dimensions, portals, or whatever it was. There's so many of these now that they're sending to me. But the one I think that really gave verification, it finally had proof. See, I've done the Art Bell show where you're on all night long. And that's the hard show to do because you have to talk all night. You've all listened to the Art Bell, I guess, haven't you? Around here it's a little hard to get it. But it has something like 30 million listeners. And when I do that show, the first time that phone didn't quit ringing for 2 weeks. It rang all day and all night. And then it went into emails the next time I did it, and we had 400 emails a day. Has a tremendous readership, but it's on all night. So you have to stay up all night to talk and answer the phone calls that come in and all of that. So this one night I did it. Well, I began to get the emails. And there was one lady emailed me, and she said, I hope you can explain what has happened. She said, because it's on all night, a lot of people don't stay up and listen to it. They have these tape recorders that will record hours and hours on one tape. I don't know what they call them, but they can turn on the radio and it'll record the entire show. They said, there was 3 friends. They all turned on the tape recorder, went to bed, and they recorded the show. The next morning, the one woman gets up, turns on the tape recorder, listened to the show. She finds out it wasn't the Art Bell show. It was a sporting event. She said, what's this? Well, we told everybody, turn off the phones. Because they said they create havoc with the sound system. Yeah, zap it. Okay, all right. I forgot to mention that again. Okay. What was that? Okay, all right. Okay. But they heard the call letters and they knew it was the right station. They called the station and they said, oh, we don't carry Art Bell anymore and we're not going to ever do it again. It was a sporting event. And so the woman calls her other friend and she said, yeah, that's what I got too. I got this sporting thing. What's going on? The third friend got the show. Same call letters. They knew it was the same station. Now, what happened? 2 didn't, and the other one did. And later she said, by the way, now they're carrying the Art Bell show again. But she wanted me to tell her what happened. But a week after I got the email, and I answered them, trying to answer the best way I could, I was doing a Unity Church lecture in Memphis. These people lived in Nashville. And they drove from Nashville, and they were 3 elderly ladies. Nobody's going to make something up. And they said, we came all this way to really tell you it did happen, and we have the tape recordings to prove it. Now that's proof. Now what happened? There were 2 of them in a dimension where the show did not exist, and the other one was in the dimension where we were broadcasting from. This is what a lot of these strange stories, things happen like this. So it probably happens to you and you just say, oh, I probably made it up or I didn't pay attention, these kind of strange things. One of the strangest one was this one man emailed me and he said, he went out to the airport watching the jets take off. He's watching the jet take off, takes off, then it goes backwards, and it goes forwards, then it goes backwards, until it finally takes off. And he says, jets can't go backwards. And as he stood there watching the other planes, they did the same thing. Forward, backwards, forwards, until it finally took off. Then he went out in the clouds, were doing the same thing, back and forth in the sky. And he goes out to the sidewalk, the cars are going forward and backing up and going forward and backing up. And this went on for quite a while before it finally returned to normal. And he says, what was happening? I said, the only thing I could think of is maybe he was at a juncture of the dimensions where it was not solidified. I said, if anybody else has a better explanation, I don't know what it could be. But this is important to understand about the dimensions so you'll understand when I'm talking about the new earth. But I don't know if you can think of anything else or not, strange things like this. There's been all kinds of strange stories that I've been told. You know, people, you probably had it. Maybe you were at home and somebody will tell you they saw you downtown at a store or something. And you said, no, I was home all day. I've had many stories of things like that. And I was at one where we were doing a conference in Hot Springs, Arkansas, by the lake. And it was on the day that the gambling begins, the horse races. And this woman came to the conference and she said, well, I had a hard time making up my mind. I didn't know whether I wanted to come to this or go to the races because it was starting on the same day. I said, well, I finally decided I'll come to the conference. So she was there all day. Well, we had a banquet that night, and these men came in for the banquet, and they saw her, and they said, oh, it's nice to see you again. They said, boy, wasn't that nice, all that money you won at the races. And she said, what? I've been here all day. They said, no, you sat next to us at the races. And she said, well, how was I dressed? She said, just like you are right now. And see, this is what I found. When you make a decision, you put energy. Everything's energy. You put energy into these different decisions. We all do this. We decide, should we go here? Should we go there? Should we get married? Should we not get married? Should we take this job or not that job? You put energy into either decision. We decide, we'll do this. What happens to the energy of the decision you don't follow through? It creates its own reality. This is the things that are hard to understand. In that other reality, another you is living out the other decision. You got married over here, you got divorced over there, and maybe you had a different job, but you don't know about it because you're focused on this life. Imagine how confusing that would be if you did know all of these other things. But when I told the story about the woman with the racetrack, they always want to know what happened to the money. Because I said, I guess the woman in the other reality is the one who got the money. But we would never have known that if they hadn't have come in and told us about it. So there's a lot of strange things out there. And the people that tell me these things, they say, I can't tell anybody this. They're going to think I'm crazy. And they're sitting there telling me these things, and they said, you mean you're not freaking out? I said, no, I've heard it before. You're perfectly normal, believe me. So this is what I keep finding more and more about, these, what I call the alternate realities. And they said it's not quite as simple as making a decision to go here or go there. I'm giving this to you the easy way. I don't want to blow too many minds. Some of you may already understand all of this. They said it's not just that. It means every time you make any decision, to cross the street, to stay home, to get up and down out of a chair, every time you make a decision and you do one thing instead of another, another reality is created. So it splits again and again and again and again to where you have thousands of you living all these different kinds of realities. Now, they have said there's no way any of us can ever understand all of these things. It's absolutely impossible. They told me one time, all of your questions will never be answered because some information is as poison rather than medicine, because we couldn't possibly understand it in our frame of reference and it could cause too many problems. They said, in that case, we cannot give you the answers. We'll do what we can, but they said, it's not the brain, it's the mind. The mind does not have the ability to understand certain concepts. It's impossible. So they tell me little things that sometimes to me sound astounding, but they said we cannot ever see the entire picture until we cross over to the other side. The blinders are lifted and then we can see it all, the entire thing. But there is so much out there that we don't know, and that's what I'm still searching for. I keep thinking, there's nothing that I haven't already heard, that I can't hear anything weirder than that. But then something else comes in. So I don't have any idea where it's going or where is it going to stop, if it will, because they said as long as I'm doing this, I will continue to find information. That's why I'm the reporter and the investigator and putting it all together. Okay, I was trying to think what part to go to next. There's so much that they have told me about. Okay. One thing that's amazing has been happening. It's in the books about the God source. And our concept of God is totally wrong. You know, Father Pat's sitting over here nodding, you know. We personify him. That's the only way the church can teach it, and the only way a lot of us can understand it is make it into a person. Have to put it into a physical form. This is our physical form. That doesn't mean everything else is physical. I've had people that are energy beings. This, I believe, is closer to what OT was talking about. It's an energy being that is light, and it can create what it wants. But there's all kinds of different kinds of beings. Just because we're physical, this is not all there is, but it's all that some people can even comprehend. They can't understand anything more than what this is. But you've lived on other planets, you've lived in other dimensions, you've had energy bodies. There isn't anything that's out of the realm of possibility. Okay, so I began having more and more people going back to what they called the source. Instead of going into a past life, they went to the source. And I didn't know what it was at first, but now I'm hearing it so much that I recognize it. In the book I wrote about Between Death and Life, that told you where you go when you die and what it's like on the other side, I asked every question I could think of, and one thing I wanted to know was about God. Now this was in the beginning of my work. They said, there's no way you can conceive what God really is. They said, your perception of God is like a tiny thread compared to what it really is. And then they said, consider other people who don't even have a metaphysical background. What their concept of God isn't even this tiny thread. But they said, God is the glue that holds everything together. If he were to wink out for a fraction of a second, everything would dissolve. It is that great of a power, and it's an energy power. And when I've had people go back to the source, first one woman said, I'm in the sun. And I said, what do you mean? She said, this is what it looks like. It's a bright, bright light, and I'm in the sun. Well, what's it like to be in the sun? I thought you meant the sun in the sky. She said, well, it's not hot. I think it's very beautiful. I don't want to leave. It's such total love. I want to stay here forever. And then it got down to, as I asked more and more questions, a lot of times they refer to it as the great central sun, which is the same thing as the source or God. It's where everything came from. And in the beginning, we were all part of God, all part of the source. And then when he exploded out, because he wanted to learn, he had a curiosity, he wanted to learn, he exploded out. This was the Big Bang theory. Then all these sparks flew out. And all of these sparks became planets, galaxies, and individual souls.
Thank you for joining us on Self Manifest. Remember, you've got the power to make your dreams a reality. Don't forget to check out the link below for more. Stay inspired, stay positive, and keep manifesting those dreams.